Are you satisfied with the political stance of Germany? If not, what would you expect them to do differently, given the situation with Edward Snowden? And secondly, we've observed that programs like the counterintelligence program of the FBI and the CHOAS program initiated by the CIA is not really recorded in mainstream German historical literature. Could you talk about those programs as well?
Sure. So, I mean, one of the things that has, I guess, surprised me the most is that there are certain governments. I think all governments have benefited from the reporting we've been able to do, but there are certain governments that have benefited the most. I think the Brazilian government has benefited a huge amount because of how much reporting there was that was done. We were able to report on spying on the entire Brazilian population, but also spying specifically on Petrobras, the oil giant, and then also the personal communications of the president, Dilma Rousseff. Same thing in Germany. I would put Germany as sort of the other country alongside Brazil that has benefited the most, spying on the German population, but also German political leaders. And so what you have, the reason you have that is because there was one individual who was willing to risk everything in order to protect the privacy rights of German citizens and German political leaders. And they benefited greatly from that. And then to watch the very same people who have benefited so much from the sacrifice of Edward Snowden, namely German politicians, be unwilling to risk anything in order to do for him what he did for them, which is to protect his political rights from persecution, has been, I think, not just surprising, but kind of horrible to watch. I actually don't think that the German government would have to risk all that much if it were to give asylum to Snowden. But what we saw even in the investigation that the German parliament pretended to do was that they weren't willing to risk anything, even bring Edward Snowden to Germany just to interview him or to question him, if it meant alienating the United States or angering the United States in any way. So I think the investigation here, the attempts to find out what the NSA was really doing, were more symbolic than they were genuine. I don't think there was any willingness to pay any price at all to get to the bottom of it or even to put real limits on it. And then as far as like the historical examples that you asked about, I mean, there have been decades of abuse on the part of all kinds of governments of surveillance power. And that's why it does surprise me sometimes when some people are kind of nonchalant about the idea of spying, as though it would almost be surprising if the government were abusing that power. We know from decades of history that actually it's almost impossible for human beings to avoid abusing surveillance power. It would be shocking if they weren't abusing it, I think, is the lesson of history.